Greetings, glory and honor to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, in whom we have hope of eternal life. Unless the Lord returns, we're all going to die someday, but we are encouraged to live this life as best as we can, with purpose, that will build up for us treasures in heaven. And it says in 3 John chapter 3, 3 John chapter 1, verse 2, above all, I wish you health as your soul. You may prosper in health as your soul prospers. And so what inspired part of this series of shows is I have friends who are dealing with cancer. I'm also trying to prevent myself from becoming diabetic as I'm entering my senior citizen years. For my age, I am relatively healthy. If my voice sounds a little raspy, it's because I was eating some decadent food, and I'm now going to test my glucose with that. The other thing is, because biochemistry and cellular biology can be insufferably boring, I'm thinking about incorporating this because biochemistry and cellular biology is where it's at as far as making the ID argument, intelligent design and creation science argument, and annihilating evolutionary theory. I'm very upset that many creationists keep focusing on chimp-human ancestry. Oh my goodness, this is probably the worst area to try to make a defense for creationism, because primarily we are extremely similar to chimpanzees. I believe the Creator designed us to have similarities to chimps and other model organisms in order that we may understand human biology without having to dissect humans to death. Just as in the book of Leviticus and the Torah, I think that's the right word, or the Pentateuch, animals are sacrificed in our place. So it's a picture of Christ being sacrificed for us so that we don't have to suffer. And we can do medical research by studying organisms that are similar to us and also organisms that are dissimilar to us. Why would we study bacteria that are so different than us? Because they're easy to study, they multiply quickly, we can do experiments easily. But when we want to test pharmaceuticals, we want to test the pharmaceuticals and medical procedures on dogs, on pigs, mice, and rats especially. And chimpanzees would be a good model organism, but some people consider that unethical. Sorry for my sarcasm there. It's ethical for them to do experiments on aborted fetuses and aborting them, and it's considered unethical to treat chimpanzees as if they're humans. So off my soapbox now. So I'm exploring a strategy of teaching intelligent design and also helping the students get something out of it more than just a theological, philosophical biochemistry lesson. I want it to have some practical impact on their life. If it gives them a healthy life in the process, then they can come away. So I think that'll be a big selling point. If you learn the biochemistry, you'll be able to manage your health better. And that counts for a lot, for you and your loved ones. And it's something to be passionate about, health, because honestly, studying biochemistry is a very passionless discipline for me. Now, there's some people out there that are a little different upstairs, and they love that stuff. For me, it was agony. It was agony, but I praise God, after it's like climbing a mountain, it's agony. But once you're at the top, you look and like, man, I'm so glad I'm here. It's just like when I was in flight school, you started in ground school, and man, that was miserable. And like, man, I just want to be up there in the clouds. And once you're up there in the clouds, you're flying, you've gotten your license, you're like, yeah, it was worth it. And there are a lot of things in life like that. But in order to inspire at least a little bit of passion to go that journey, I'm thinking of emphasizing nutrition and health, and how you can improve your odds of having a healthy lifestyle, and also trying to be innovative, encouraging people to be innovative with recipes, because it's one thing to say just quit all these things in your diet and then you're stuck because stuff tastes so good. Certain things taste so good. So I think there's room for tremendous innovation as far as culinary arts, figuring out a way to make the food taste as good as possible. It probably will never exceed the unhealthy food in terms of taste, and also, unfortunately, also in terms of expense. But can you at least be competitive enough that it doesn't kill you, that it makes the leap to healthiness not so agonizing? If we can do that, then there is hope we can start to rescue our bodies. And diabetes is increased by, like, I thought I saw a figure, 800%. 800%. And I mean, it's well intentioned that we want to make food as inexpensive and as tasty as possible, but it has led to a health crisis. So I'm not saying that there's any huge conspiracy to kill the population, but as the saying goes, the road to hell can be paved with many good intentions. And I mean, the increase in obesity and diabetes and cancer, it's staggering. Yes, there is an increase also in cardiovascular issues, and some of the diets out there will be a trade-off, in my opinion. I could be wrong. A trade-off between cardiovascular health and fighting diabetes, cancer, and obesity. I hope that we really don't need that trade-off. I'm having to make that decision myself because the docs have been saying your triglycerides and your cholesterol too high. Would you like to take statin drugs? And they put me on Lipitor, and I just about died. I was so sick, I was bedridden, and I said, I think this is the Lipitor. I just went off of it spontaneously, and then I reported it to the doctor 2 weeks later. I said, have you had any patients with reactions like that? He said, no, you're the only one. And I said, look, I stopped taking this, and I stopped being sick. And I think I might have gone through 2 rounds of that where I restarted, got sick, and stopped. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm going to be dead at this rate. I was so sick. I couldn't get out of bed. It felt like the room was spinning, even though I was motionless. Now, I also do have benign positional paroxysmal vertigo, which is induced by motion. But when I'm lying still, I shouldn't feel the room spinning. That was scary. I was just about to vomit because the room kept spinning, and this was happening for days. And I said, I'm not going to be able to live like this. I don't know how much damage Lipitor and those lovastatins inflicted on me. And oh my goodness, Mark O'Connell posted a comment. So thank you, Mark O'Connell. So I found out later that these statin drugs are implicated with diabetes and cancer. I'm just like, good gravy. I'm so glad I told the doctor 15 years ago, no, I'm not going to take these cholesterol lowering drugs. Now, I tried other things, and it was just really hard for me to lower my cholesterol numbers. Then these studies come out and say, well, yeah, you're at risk of cardiovascular disease, but your longevity is not affected. And I'm like, okay, so one way to approximately interpret this, you're going to die of one thing or the other, and but you'll probably live about the same length of time. with high cholesterol, all other things being equal. And I mean, it's just like, well, okay, so you're poisoning the population with statin drugs that are giving them, increasing their chance of cancer and diabetes. And then you're saying you're reducing cardiovascular problems. I'm just like, have you actually done a trade-off study on this? So, yeah, it'd be nice to have all your numbers in line. But as I have studied nutrition as best as I can, and having studied biochemistry and published in biochemistry journals, bioinformatic journals, the one unifying thing that they say across almost all nutritionists is don't have sucrose, which is regular table sugar, fructose, which is a sweetener in a lot of foods and drinks, like, say, Coca-Cola, which I absolutely love, and glucose, dextrose. I think honey's made of that. Correct me, someone, if I'm wrong. I mean, every nutritionist said if you could cut down on that, almost universally, they say that's good. So I think I'm on good ground to recommend trying to figure ways to cut that down. How you cut that down is a little bit controversial. Some say eat lots of plants and vegetables and no meat. The other side says eat only meat. And then, of course, probably the third way is somewhere in between. The thing about plant-based foods is you have a variety of things that can make you sick. I mean, you have to kind of test it out. Whereas for meat, you only have a few meats to select from, okay? Like chicken, fish, pork, and beef, maybe lamb, etc. But a nutritionist that will recommend an elimination diet, they'll try to get you to eat just one food group. And then you test out, you start to diversify to other food groups to see how you react. Now, there is someone at the Discovery Institute, Emily Reeves, Dr. Emily Reeves. She is a PhD in biochemistry. She's also a nutritionist, and she's also an ID proponent, and published in an electrical engineering journal, the IEEE Explore. She's very talented, very talented. By the way, not to be confused, there's another Emily Reeves who's also equally talented. She's a fashion model and a car mechanic. Definitely a typical guy's dream. She's a fashion model and she loves cars. Oh my goodness. So there are two Emily Reeves out there. So the Emily Reeves at the Discovery Institute runs a business called Nutriplexity, where she recommends getting a genome sequence, a whole genome sequence of your genome, and she's better able to predict what would be a good nutritional regimen for you. Now that's just incredible. I mean, she'll work hard to figure out what you need. I think, I talked to her about going through her program. Maybe someday I will. In the interim, sometimes I just consult with my doctor. I say, I'll try this and see then how my numbers stack up. So that being said, I learned something about glycemic index, and I made this recipe of really decadent chocolate cocoa coffee flavored ice cream. Cocoa flavored ice cream. It is totally decadent. The primary sweetener is this, monk fruit. Monk fruit has a 0 glycemic index, which means as far as its effect on your blood glucose, it's supposed to have 0 effect. So water should have 0 effect. It has a glycemic index of 0. So let me see if I could screen share a little bit. So, I mean, you could look this up, But now with, kind of my interest in biochemistry and health, I'm taking this stuff far more seriously than before. And I'm ashamed to admit that, but better late than never, eh? So here's the Wikipedia entry on glycemic index. Glycemic index is a number from 0 to 100 assigned to food. With pure glucose arbitrarily given the value of 100, which represents the relative rise in blood glucose level 2 hours after consuming that food. The glycemic index of a specific food depends primarily on the quantity and type of carbohydrate it contains, et cetera, et cetera. So, there are various ways to calibrate this, but basically 0 is as good as it gets, and 100 is the highest it gets. So, I apologize here. Where can I get this? I'm totally messing this up, guys. Hang on. So let me stop sharing. Apologies. So water is supposed to have 0 glycemic index. Now, how are you gonna live when you're eating food that has a 0 glycemic index? It turns out if you have foods that are made of proteins and fat but have no carbohydrates, you're good to go as far as a glycemic index. Now, they say if you eat just pure fat, that's bad for you. If you eat pure protein, that's also bad for you. If you eat protein and fat, they'll say, well, maybe it's bad for you. We don't know that yet for a fact. We do know that it may elevate your cholesterol levels, but there may be other factors that mitigate that. We just don't know. I just want to say, I'm not trusting the data anymore. They were saying they were poo-pooing meat for so long, yet it says in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 20, eat as much meat as you want. Now, the meats we have in our supermarket they're loaded up with hormones, and that could be bad, particularly insulin growth like factor 1. At least that's one I've heard is being bad. It's better if you can get the quote unquote organic meat. Yeah, it may have some antibiotics in it, but as long as it doesn't have added hormones, it's a little better. Now, ideally, if you had your own farm and you controlled all the feed and you saw the cow from birth to adulthood to slaughtering, you might be able to control the quality of the food better. So that being said, you saw me, I tested myself with the glucometer about 20 minutes after eating 3 hard-boiled eggs, and brisket, a third pound of brisket. Now, what is the glycemic index of these foods? So let's look. Now, I said I was impressed that my glucose didn't go up. So now let's look. And I honestly did not know this until today. So let's look at this today. Beef brisket does not have a glycemic index, which means it's 0. Water does not have a glycemic index because it's 0. I wish they just gave it a 0 because then you'd really know. Okay, so some say people with diabetes should avoid high-fat cuts of meat. Okay, so this is the changing viewpoint. So some are saying avoid high-fat cuts of meat because red meat is associated with increased risk of heart disease and cancer. And now I just have to point out, this is being experimentally challenged. What I might say is, yes, let's just assume it does, on average. It doesn't mean that it'll affect everyone the same way. We do know instances where people have recovered from cancer because they went on a ketogenic diet, and a carnivore diet is one form of a ketogenic diet. I don't know of any others. That's kind of the main one. And people have been cured of a huge number of um, diseases. Jordan Peterson, you ought to look that up, his carnivore diet anecdote. So even if the averages may be negative, it doesn't mean you might not respond positively to it, because everyone's biology is different. And once we start to have, there's been a big push at the National Institutes of Health to have individualized medicine based on your genome sequence. We can begin to target what nutritional regimens might be more appropriate for you. Are you the sort of person that, for example, would be able to tolerate, would be blessed to have a ketogenic diet? So, I mean, again, averages don't tell the whole story. Let's say it has high variance. Why don't we find the ones that had, positive effect and find out what are the genetic markers that put them kind of at the tail ends of the distribution, the favorable end. So even if it's a slightly negative, you could have a lot of beneficial effects for a certain segment of the population. We absolutely do know that everyone's biology is slightly different. So let's not write this off just because, an average might go one way or the other. But I'm going to argue it's still not definitive. There are some initial studies that said this is bad. They're being redone, and it's overturning prior results. Challenge me, guys, if you disagree. Okay, I can tell you the sense has been, let's revisit age-old theories. Let's revisit the methodology of the experiments we were basing this on, and let's just see if they were right. Because if we redo the experiments and the studies and we get different results, that's going to be very important to our health. We're getting hints that the earlier studies were defective, and we need better controls, etc. So the other thing is we're having too many, we might have anecdotal evidence here or there, but then now it's getting into the thousands of people that have went on ketogenic diets and have marvelous recoveries from cancer, including relatives of doctors, medical doctors. The most prominent that I know of, not personally, is Annette Bosworth, MD. She saved her mother's life. Her mom was very elderly, had her third bout of cancer, had 2 treatments of chemotherapy, and she said, "No, I'm not going through this a third time." And I don't blame her. I study topoisomerases, which are a target of chemotherapies. I published on topoisomerases. And the way you apply chemotherapy in like half of the cases of chemotherapy is to disrupt topoisomerase function with a poison. So chemotherapy is poisoning your body. Of course, you would expect then, and this happened, the grammar and / style police said, hey, if you're trying to market a cure for cancer, please don't use the word poison. It's like saying, take this poison and you're going to be cured of cancer. It's like, can you find another term for that? Okay, it's like, a ligase inhibitor. At least that way no one really understands that what you're doing is poisoning your body. Forgive me for laughing. And I see the horrific effects of saving people's lives this way. My co-author, Joe DeWeese, he was deeply motivated to study topoisomerase because he had 2 relatives that had cancer and recovered successfully with chemotherapies. I'm not knocking chemotherapies if they saved lives, but wouldn't we want something less painful? And maybe, maybe we could combine it with diet. In some cases, it's great that some people have been able to be so successful at this. I'm going to discuss a little bit of the mechanism why this should work. And from a theory standpoint, I said this actually does look kind of good. So let me show you the theory here. And this is not original, okay? And this is basic biochemistry, guys. This is basic biochemistry. So if someone is on a, let me see if I can get this set up here. Someone is on a ketogenic diet. You have a ketone body that's called BHB. It is a acronym for beta hydroxybutyrate. BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate. Let me just make sure. Let's see, beta hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and acetone. Let me just double check. I do want to be thorough here. BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone. So this is a ketone, and it can cross the even the blood-brain boundary and go to the cells in the brain, and then it goes through. It eventually ends up in the mitochondria, and it has this thing called the TCA cycle, which is also the Krebs cycle, and out comes this ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is energy that other processes can use. So ketone, and you get ATP. The numbers associated with that is 1 ketone makes 22 ATP. 1 molecule of ketone makes 22 ATP. All right, if I read that wrong, anyone feel free to correct me. Whereas glucose that makes more. Each glucose molecule can approximately make 30 to 32 ATP molecules. So yeah, you're going to be able to make more per glucose molecule. You can make more ATPs, but it has a different, it has a different chemical cycle to make ATP. And let's see, do I have it here? All right, so there's first this this process called glycolysis to make acetyl-CoA. Okay, I mean, this is starting to get deep in the biochemistry. I apologize. As a biochemistry student, I had to memorize this. It was miserable. I mean, this is like memorizing a phone book. Take a few hours to memorize it. But, that was assigned, and we had to learn that. So we'll go back to this diagram. So basically, you want acetyl-CoA. So glucose will become pyruvate, eventually acetyl-CoA through glycolysis. The BHB eventually becomes acetyl-CoA. At least, according to this diagram, does it even need extra steps? I don't know. It can be oxidation via something. Anyway, I'm not a biochemist who knows that off the top of my head. Let me Google something here. Krebs cycle, TCA cycle. Same thing, or citric acid cycle, TCA cycle, Krebs cycle, same thing. So let's look at the Krebs cycle. Let's see if I could find one. I had to memorize this to get through biochemistry. And this is it. I had to memorize this diagram. In fact, this isn't even the best diagram. let me show something closer to what I had to memorize. Yeah, this is more of the one that my teacher made me memorize. I had, oh my goodness, to get 100 on this question, you had to identify every chemical. I mean, you could not miss this because you get dot points. So you could see, like, if this is a 20-point question, it's like, okay, you got that wrong, 1 or 2 points off. You got that one wrong, 1 or 2 points off. You got it in the wrong order. I mean, it's really easy to grade this because you just count how many chemicals and how many phases, and did you get them in the right order? And this is, after you just try to memorize this and spend 14 hours trying to get this right, I go off somewhere and just study this 30 minutes, and then later in the day do the same thing. And after 2 weeks of that, you kind of just know that by heart. You could just recite it almost, well, not quite as good as your own name. I've since forgotten it. But they make you, I mean, if you want to learn what biochemistry is, you just memorize and do more memorizing. So let me get rid of this. So you have the glycolysis and then the TCA cycle. And so you have glycolysis here and then the TCA cycle. Whereas the ketogenic diet, you have a ketone and you have the TCA cycle. So when you drink that honey, it's already in the form of glucose or very close to it. It's very easy. If it's not already glucose, it'll convert it, gets in your bloodstream, and powers the mitochondria. What is sobering, though, is the glucose cycle can be ultimately, for reasons that I don't know, it's more damaging to the mitochondria to be running this fuel through the mitochondria. Now, for guys who love cars, certain fuels, the car can run with it, but there's certain more fuels that are bad for your car. And so glucose is particularly bad long-term for the engine, so to speak, of the mitochondria. Now, I mean, obviously people have been able to live on bread-based, high carbohydrate diets, high sugar diets for a long time, but the wear and tear starts to add up in terms of diabetes and cancer and obesity. Whereas the ketones are considered a better fuel for your car engine, so to speak, your mitochondria. Again, I don't totally know the reasons why, but I mean, this should not be surprising. So, I mean, a car can run on all sorts of fuels, and there are cars that can really run on a very diverse set of fuels. The M1 Abrams tank, for example, can run on just an enormous variety. It can run on, I think it can run on diesel, can run on gasoline, can run on kerosene. It's amazing. But we would presume there's certain fuels that are more damaging than others, both to the engine and to the tank overall. Similarly, we can expect that with this situation here. And it turns out that the high glucose diet, not only does it affect the mitochondria, it affects just so many other things about the cell. What they call, it creates high insulin resistance. It affects the cell signaling. So it's not just the mitochondria. The mitochondria is part of the cell. And if I were teaching intelligent design, I'd say, look, here's a diagram of the cell. Inside the cell is the mitochondria. High glucose diet affects both the mitochondria and the entire cell. And so how is this relevant, first of all, to cancer? Cancers can really only operate, a normal cell. So let me show you a normal cell. A normal cell can operate both on a ketogenic fuel or a glucose fuel. Cancers, on the other hand, can only or generally operate on a glucose fuel. So what does that mean? If you're on a ketogenic diet, ketogenic diet, you're basically starving cancer cells. So I've just given you one reason you want a ketogenic diet if you have a tendency toward cancer. You know, people say, Sal, that's crank. That won't work. You need all these other expensive drugs and therapies. I say, okay, let's grant that. Let's grant that you'll need radiation, surgery, chemotherapy, or immunotherapy. But wouldn't you improve your chances? Why don't I throw that out there? Do you think any of those that think this is not curative, why don't you just tell me? Do you think, given the biochemistry I just shared with you, do you think that'll improve your chances? Because if you have a high glucose diet, you're feeding those cancer cells. You're not giving yourself a fighting chance. If you have a ketogenic diet, you're feeding your good cells, helping them proliferate, and at the very least, you're not giving the cancer cells the food that they starve for. They long for that glucose. So I've given you here basic biochemistry. This is textbook biochemistry. And a lot of biochemists began to say, hey, do we really need that much chemotherapy? Can't we just supplement it and just maybe alleviate the suffering? Maybe we could reduce the dosage of chemotherapy. Wouldn't that be better? I'm just throwing that out there. Just throwing it out there. If, on the other hand, we start to see the tumors reduce, that would be good. We do have some cases where the tumor growth continued, but it was at a reduced rate. And people eventually needed surgery or some sort of supplemental therapy. So I'm not arguing necessarily that you stop all the other treatments, but I just laid out the basic biochemistry. It should help put the brakes on some of this, okay? So maybe it's not going to fully stop or arrest the cancers, depending on the type of cancer. You're certainly not hurting it. And I could tell you, if you have an aggressive cancer, it's like, well, the least of my concerns is having high cholesterol. Because if you're going to die in the next year anyway, it's like, well, why don't you try something? And that was the case with Annette Bosworth and her mother. Her mother was dying and said, I don't want to go through chemo for the third time. I'm already old. I don't want to suffer like that. And the daughter said, look, Mom, how about we just postpone 6 weeks? Give me 6 weeks, put you on a ketogenic diet, and let's just go from there. To her, okay, so her mom's cancer is doubling every 6 weeks. She is expecting that her mom would increase the markers of cancer growth, that it might double, but she was hoping it wouldn't quite be a doubling, like say maybe an increase by, just 50% instead of 100%. To her astonishment, it was a reduction by 30%. And her mother's still alive and healthy. There's a beautiful video of this. This is, this is not original. Some biochemists and nutritionists are like, well, duh, why are you going to feed the cancers glucose and pyruvate? So glucose gets converted to pyruvate through the glycolysis cycle. Why are you going to give the cancer what it wants? Why don't you starve them of what they want? Now, I actually don't know what happens if you starve the cell. Does it spontaneously die, or does it just kind of go into, kind of like a hibernation? That's a question above my pay grade. But, I'm just saying, look, it's going to help you fight this. I've just given basic biochemistry here. So now I'm kind of like, dang, maybe it was worth it to have suffered through biochemistry, because now at least, I can feel a little bit confident that what I'm saying isn't so off the wall. So let's look at constructing a ketogenic diet. So we talked about glycemic indexes, where 0 is desirable. Water has a glycemic index of 0. and glucose arbitrarily assigned a glycemic index of 100, being that's the highest possible. So if I wanted to make ice cream, I would need this ingredient. So let me just see if I can make this a little bigger. I would need this ingredient here. Oops, sorry. See if I could move it to my... I'm sorry, I'm making a mess of this. You could see it has 0 carbohydrates. It has lots of fat. It has saturated fat. Thankfully, it has 0 trans fat. I think that's good. I don't think it has any protein. This is pure fat, guys. Pure fat, but no carbohydrates. So now let's look at this article. It says the glycemic index of wheat cream can vary depending on the fat content of the ice cream and whether it contains added sugar. The glycemic index is 0 if it contains no carbs. So a lot of whipped creams and heavy creams have sugar added to them to make them sweeter. But if you have just plain whipped cream with no sugar, it should have no more effect on your body, no glycemic effect on your body any more than water. However, it does have calories. So all your calories will come from fat, but it's not going to cause your glycemic index to go up. So again, you're treating your mitochondria to things that are healthy for it. It's good fuel for the mitochondria. It will help reduce insulin sensitivity. Reduce insulin resistance, increase insulin sensitivity, which improves cell signaling. So glucose levels in your blood are like temperature. Too much will kill you. Too little will kill you. You need to be in that Goldilocks zone where it's just right. In the United States, we tend to be on the high side. If you're diabetic, you're going to have glucose levels like 100, 200, higher or higher. I accidentally, ignorantly gave, I was trying to get my mom to have some calories in her diet, so I fed her tea. And then I fed her a lot of tea, and I kept, she'd say I'm thirsty, and I'd feed her more tea that had lots of honey in it. And I said, Sal, test her glucose. It hit like 600. I almost panicked. What have I done to my poor mom? And so I immediately started giving her just plain water. And then I gave her a shot of insulin, brought it down. I don't know. I will say this. I was trying to save her life in 2018 because she would barely drink a cup of liquid. I thought she was going to die in 2018 because she was going to die of dehydration, but I was able to get her to drink a little more liquid, up to 2 cups a day. And then I said, well, she's going to die of malnutrition if I don't give her something to give her some energy. And so honey was the next step. I don't regret giving her that because she could barely eat. And finally, I started giving her protein milkshakes. She could barely take that, but so this went on for a month, and she should have been dead. She somehow hung on. She lost weight. She hung on. She was able to recover from her urinary tract infection. And that was the thing that was slowly killing her. And God gave me another 3 lovely years with her. Eventually her diabetes and vascular dementia, and she died at 95. Okay, so she lived a full life. Praise God for that. But I didn't realize the honey in the tea was just making her blood sugar just go crazy. So ideally, your blood sugar is down to 80 if you're a normal person. So I've seen some high numbers. This is where I learned to start testing glucose levels in the blood, begin to understand it. And then also I had stethoscopes. I'd start to listen to her heart. I had sphygmometers. I'd be measuring her blood, her blood pressure, uh, her heart rate. I could hear her heart. I even still have memories of the way it used to beat. It was not like I compared it to my heartbeat, and I said, okay, I'm her son. This is the way my heart beats. And then I could put it on her, the stethoscope on her, and I said, would be my mom's heartbeat. I would be able to tell between the two of us, if you played a recording of the two of us, which was my heartbeat versus hers. I also had I had an oxygen meter. Yeah, I had a glucose meter, all sorts of things, and I learned these diagnostics. And by God's grace, I was able to care for her, and she was walking and happy in 2019 and most of 2020. When COVID hit, it was kind of hard for her, and she was in isolation with me, which is really sad. And well, anyway, I learned some of this. I was able to help her live, and I think, and to give her 1.5 years of quality life. That I can't tell you that's of any accomplishment I've had in life. I would say that would rate as the top. To know that you've been able to give someone life and quality life because you're able to use your knowledge. And I had two sisters who were nurses that had just given up on her, but I refused to give up trying. And I'm glad that I had the extra 3 years with my dear mother. I cannot trade that for anything. And any of you who have ever loved someone intensely, 3 years counts for a lot. So anyway, glycemic index of 0. So yeah, they'll say this is decadent ice cream. I can make ice cream with this, and it's very decadent in the sense it's rich and creamy, and you can sweeten it with this monk fruit, and it will taste like a butterscotch flavored ice cream. Monk fruit has a 0 glycemic index. Now, some of these sugar substitutes, I think, will have a glycemic index in that it'll raise your glucose level. Sucralose, I don't know. Why don't I look it up? Glycemic index of sucralose. How about NutraSweet? What do they call that? Aspartame? Aspartame. It says it has a glycemic index of 0, but some people say that's that's misleading. Officially, it has a 0 index, but some people say it has some problems. Aspartame, so that'd be like NutraSweet. You have sugar, alcohol, sucraloses. I've also heard those have problems. So let me look at sucralose. Sucralose. It says its glycemic index is 0, but some complain that it will still affect your glucose levels. Now, stevia and monk fruit are reported to both have glycemic indexes of 0, but also are favorable to your long-term glucose blood sugar levels. So this is a question I need to explore. How is it that aspartame and sucralose can be rated as negative even though they have glycemic indexes of 0? They're claiming that it does affect long-term something in the metabolism that is damaging and really won't help you. So that is a little disconcerting. We would hope that we do have in monk fruit and stevia something that lowers glucose levels. So, I mean, long term, immediately it may have a positive impact. So we'll just see. So just file that away for now. That is a good open question. Let's look at the glycemic index of beef. Beef brisket, like other meats, poultry, does not have a glycemic index, so it is 0. Bread has a high glycemic index. Let's say glycemic index, hard-boiled egg. A glycemic index of 0. Hard-boiled eggs has a glycemic index of 0. I will admit that I like soy sauce. Soy sauce has a glycemic index of around 20. All right, so I like soy sauce to flavor. So that's just a data point. So now let's just look at some other things. Bread has a glycemic index of 72, which is on the high side, definitely. Beer. Oh my goodness. Beer has a glycemic index of 100. And as a bonus, apparently this is what contributes to guys getting a beer belly. High glycemic drinks. Ironically, vodka has a low glycemic index, but it has other adverse effects on your body given its high alcohol content. So, but I'm sorry, that just kind of, that actually shocked me. Beer has a high glycemic index. I mean, this is like taking, mainlining sugar into your mouth, table sugar. And okay, so let's look at getting a beer belly. A beer belly is a term for excess fat in the abdominal region, also known as visceral fat, caused by a combination of unhealthy habits, including drinking too much alcohol and a lifestyle of eating fatty foods can contribute to a beer belly, and lack of exercise. It's not just the beer, but oh my goodness, look at that glycemic index. So now, this video here is a picture of homemade ice cream, and I followed his recipe except for adding sugar. Now you could tell this guy loves to eat. I mean, just look at the One Pot Chef. If you want to look this up, that's who he is, One Pot Chef. And he gives how to make this food, this ice cream. And so it's very easy. All you do is you get heavy whipping cream like the one that I showed you earlier. So you get something like this. And then you can add coffee to it. And I don't see where he adds any sweetener to it. You can add a sweetener. So if you want to put sugar to make it sweet. Now what I did instead is I added monk fruit. I do know, oh my goodness, at least as far as appetite, I started eating monk fruit. I started using monk fruit as a sweetener, trying to fight my pre-diabetes, reducing my glucose level, trying to get it below 100. I was moderately successful at that, even without any exercise. Exercise is a pretty important component to reducing your glucose level. Anyway, I inadvertently lost 20 pounds in 3 months. It just went. And I realized glucose triggers ghrelins. I think it's called a ghrelin, hormones that make you hungry. And so eating all that processed sugar, the sucrose, table sugar, and fructose in all sorts of drinks. I especially love Coca-Cola. Oh my goodness. I drink caffeine-free Coke. I could live on a diet of pizza, ice cream, and caffeine-free Coke. All high glycemic index foods, loaded with carbohydrates, particularly simple ones. And that wasn't good. But now you know what my food cravings are. I'm surprised I'm not dead yet, given the diet that I had. And I started losing appetite. And I'm like, Sal, why did you lose so much weight? And I realized I wasn't eating very much, but I wasn't hungry. It wasn't like I had willpower or anything. I just didn't want to eat like I used to. And then I became skinny thin. I'm just like, well, look, it's not like I'm feeling like I'm on a starvation diet. I might be on a starvation diet, but I surely don't feel like it because I feel full all the time. So the monk fruit, I credit with the change in my metabolism. Now, when I started to relax, uh, you know, monk fruit is a sweetener. I started to drink sodas again with high fructose, corn syrup. That's what's inside Coca-Cola, and root beers and ginger ales, et cetera, et cetera. And I started to indulge in regular ice cream and donuts again and cake, um, and eating ramen. Okay, so now you know my diet. Um, I did try to eat more vegetables. Now, the vegetables are interesting depending on the vegetables you eat. They can have low glycemic index, lots of carbohydrates, but they're complex. Therefore, you have a low glycemic index. That means it doesn't break down so quickly. The body has to exert a little bit more, and it takes more time, and that's healthy for your body. Various vegetables also have a lot of benefits in terms of helping you. Those who are advocates of the carnivore diet will say, well, meat is superior. And I would just qualify that. It depends on who you are. If you're Michaela Peterson, daughter of Jordan Peterson, definitely the carnivore diet is superior for her. For those on the vegan end or vegetarian end, it may be an appropriate diet for you. And that is my present view. There, it depends on who you are, which diet is most appropriate. But the one unifying thing is having high glycemic index foods like glucose, fructose, table sugar, which is sucrose, bad for you. That's the one underlying theme. So what I'm giving you as far as consumption of those substances is as mainstream as it gets. We may disagree on the ultimate effect of all of these as it relates to diabetes and cancer, but everyone will say it's a net positive. It's the degree of positivity that may be in dispute. Okay, so I'm trying to qualify, where I think I'll get uniform agreement and where I think I might get some pushback. So what did I do to make this decadent ice cream? And so what he would do, he would then put it inside this tub and put it in the freezer. And after it gets frozen, he'd scoop it up and it would look like that. I mean, let me just go through that. So you have the, let me just let you relish this photo. I mean, just as he was making this, that kind of like made me crave ice cream so bad. Okay, you start with a bowl, you add cream, you can flavor it with coffee or whatever, and he loves coffee, which is kind of bad, the caffeinated kind. And I presume this is already sweetened. And then he'd subject to it to a mixer and then put it in the freezer. And now he's going to freeze it. And then afterward, he scoops it out. And doesn't that look delicious? Doesn't that look so decadent? And I got to tell you, doesn't he look like a guy who just loves eating? He loves eating. He loves cooking. He loves eating. He seems like a very happy guy. I'm not trying to be harsh here. I mean, you can't help but love the guy, but you have to be like concerned about your health, brother. You're a beautiful human being that you have such a zest for good making good tasting food and consuming them and sharing your recipes with the world. But you're like, this is almost a curse that you're able to make food taste so good that you just want to eat all day. And I mean, he's a beautiful human being, and it's kind of sad he has this artistic mind that can create all these. But that being said, all those issues aside, the recipe he gave me insight because I started shopping for ice cream that didn't have sugar. And a lot of them had these sugar substitutes that, like I said, sucralose is very concerning to me. I would prefer stevia or monk fruit. And so I was looking, well, how can I make my own? And he showed the process there. You didn't need an ice cream machine. You just needed a blender, or in his case, a mixer. And then you just put it in the freezer. And I said, that sounds doable. And so I made this. And the mistake I made, unfortunately, was I had quite a supply of powdered milk that had sugar added to it. So I had this powdered milk, which I got during COVID 3 years ago. I went to the store and just bought whatever food I could get my hands on because the store shelves were emptying out. It was scary. And I said, will I be able to feed myself and my mom? So I bought huge amounts of food. I said, we have enough food to last 3 years for an isolation. And it was scary. We were locked down for 1 whole year. But we had food to last 4 years. And I still have tons of this food. Now, not that I really like this baby product, but that's all they had on the shelves. I said, I'll take it. It might keep us alive if we need it. Well, mom has gone home to be with the Lord, but I have plenty of this and I'm using it up. Unfortunately, I looked at the ingredients and it has it has 6 grams of added sugars and a total of 15 grams of carbohydrates per serving. In a serving, it doesn't describe a serving. I think you need 4 scoops to make a serving. I put 3 scoops into my decadent dessert. The other thing is I added cocoa, and that has a little bit of sugar, 1 gram per every 6 grams you used. I added mushroom coffee, and it has about 1.55 grams per serving. Let's see here. Where's the dietary label? Well, I'm sorry. It's there. So this mixture that started out with good intentions, when I added the flavorings that I didn't need, it had sugar in it. I don't know if vanilla extract will have that issue. I'm going to read the label more carefully next time, but that is delicious. It's decadent. Oh my goodness. That totally satisfied, or I'd say 80% satisfied my ice cream cravings. I'm going to see the doctor maybe in about 6 weeks, and he's going to check my lipid panel. It might horrify him, but I can work on that. I can work on that one thing at a time. Do I get rid of all this ice cream in my life and see if the lipid panel goes down? But one thing about quote unquote elimination diets is, since it's simpler, you have fewer variables to control, and you could see what'll happen to you if you eliminate one particular food. Doctors who advocate the carnivore diet have said it is one mistake in implementing a carnivore diet is you're eating so much protein, you're not getting any fats that are the highest density source of energy of any food group. And it would be good to have it. It'll actually help you lose weight if you eat the right kinds of fats. It'll also make you healthy. It'll help with your blood glucose levels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of benefits to having the right kind of fat in the right amount. So now I ate a cup of this, and they said, the test should take place about 2 hours later. We're about an hour in, since about an hour and a half since I was gorging myself on this dessert, and then also like 2 hours since I had the basically a steak and egg meal. And with all the caveats where I had inadvertently added way more sugar than I intended, I'm now going to run a glucose test. So let me get, oh, here's my antiseptic. So let's go through this again. This time let me try my right hand here. Let's spray this on. Okay, I'm going to now prime my meter. Okay, it is primed. Now my piercing device. And I do remind myself, yeah, this is just a little bit of pain. As my skin gets pierced by this so that I will bleed. But it's comforting to know Jesus, he was pierced for our transgressions. So on that basis, I will begin to understand Christ's love, because he is willing to suffer. He's willing to be pierced for our transgressions, and that sort of pain is incomprehensibly greater than the little needle. The little needle. He was stabbed with a spear and had nails piercing his arms and his ankles. This is just the needle. But I honor you, Lord. Help me to bear my cross each day. And by his he was pierced for our transgressions. Let me just add a little more antiseptic. I'm going to pierce one of my fingers. I don't know if alcohol causes you to sting. Okay, I'm going to now get the meter in ready state. Dr. Bosworth says hit the side of the finger, not the middle. He was pierced for our transgressions. That hurt. Okay, so I'm bleeding. Test number 1. Okay, let's see it. Real time. 105, which is not bad. That is not bad considering I messed up and I've been gorging myself. That is not bad at all. Like I said, I've seen numbers in the 200s, 300s, even 600s. Maybe it was 500. I don't remember. It was a high number that I was like, oh my goodness, I think I'm gonna, I began to panic. Okay. The second test, let's see what it gives. It's going to be higher, 119. So always this, for whatever reason, the first test gives a lower number, the second test a higher number. Now, thankfully, I could review. Let me see. There's a way that I can review the numbers. I don't know, it's not real clear. It gives a log of the time and the measurements there. And I'm sorry it's not so clear here. So earlier today at 4:16, I gave a test, 93. On the same blood sample, it went up to 99. At 6:48 p.m., 105 for the first test. On the same blood sample, it was 119. Now, to calibrate this device, like I said, what I should do is I want to get a second glucose meter that uses a slightly different technology, the one-touch system. I take both glucometers with me to the lab. So when I go to the healthcare facility, they're going to draw blood And immediately after they draw blood, I'm going to test myself. And then I'll know how accurate, I'll have some idea how accurate the glucose meters are relative to what the lab measures with far more accuracy, presumably. And then I'll know, okay, are the meters high or low? Let me look at my own calibration levels here. Let me see if I have the data. I have it here somewhere. And I'm going to record all this. I'm not going to torture you with my recording of this stuff. So I think I marked it even. I think I'm looking at if I had any calibrations. See, unfortunately, I didn't annotate this as well, but to my best, okay, here it is. I have my records. I have my records. On December 14, 2023, my AccuCheck indicated a value of 106 and 111. Later on that day, I tested myself at 96 and 91. The blood drawn, this is the lab result, was at 93. So that means if I use AccuCheck, I could be registering a little bit high. Now, I was a little bit in, this is unfortunately, my A1C was high because I was drinking tons of root beer. I was so confident that my glucose levels had gone down. In fact, they had. In fact, what was happening, they went all the way down to 80, 78, and I was losing a ton of weight. I was down to the mid 80s, which is normal. That's, normal is between 70 and 90. And I kind of gave up because I was like, hey, I'm doing well. I should have been persevering. I can bring it down again if I'm strict, and I should do that, but I have to now try to gain. I lost way too much weight. I became skin and bones, and I wasn't trying to starve myself. I just telling you, I felt full all the time. It was, it's kind of bad that when you have to eat and you feel like you're going to vomit because you're feeling so full. But I just did not want to eat. And so I'm just like, gee, maybe my body was so used to having Coca-Cola, pizza, and ramen and ice cream that it's like, well, okay, just to make you hungry, you need to have all that. And so my body, just kind of overcompensated and said, well, okay, you're not going to desire food at all, if you don't have any of these sugars. So, if I have to force myself to eat, if I have to eat fatty food, that'll affect my lipid panels, of course, and we'll just keep trying to fix one thing at a time. But I know quite a bit more than I did last year. And now with the specter of cancer in my friends, and then even myself, and then knowing about, going back to my old basic biochemistry, which I studied in 2016, goodness, is that already 8 years ago? It's kind of refreshing to revisit it, to see its relevance to my life, and also really in the ultimate sense, my service to the Lord. It says, he who does not take care of his own house, how can he take care of the church of God? So our own house includes our physical household, but then our body is also our house. It is a temple of the Lord. And again, 3 John chapter 1, verse 2, I desire above all, that you prosper in health as your soul prospers. I found that this compelling verse, given all the hardships the apostles were suffering through. That's a beautiful verse for the flock. So I desire above all else that your health prospers as your soul prospers. And this has been a compelling journey for me. I've had considerably more time the last 2 weeks for a variety of reasons to be doing more videos, and I'm also quite motivated more to do them. It's been a pleasure being of service to my viewers. Many times I think I need you all more than you need me. Now, this channel, Evidence Reasons Academy, is not anywhere near as viewed as my main channel, Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith. Maybe I get 20 views from my videos on this channel. That is deliberate. Some of my more nerdy stuff and kind of my editing room ruminations and brainstorming is meant for this channel. It just gives me a chance to connect to people that are very dedicated followers and friends of this channel and of my work. I will say this, I sometimes think I need you way more than you need me. I can't tell you how much of an encouragement and comfort you all are, that I have friends to share with. I do have friends I know in person, and unfortunately some of them are just not as interested in nerd topics like this. Most of my nerd friends live hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. One of those would be Joe DeWeese. I could hang out with him a lot. My friends at the Discovery Institute and their colleagues, oh my goodness, I could just hang out with them day and night. I don't get along well with theologians at all. I get along well with scientists who are ID friendly, most definitely. I don't get along with pastors or evangelists. And I'll have more to say about that, is even though they're a part of the church, they're my least favorite class within the church, in the modern church. I know that may sound like a horrible thing for me to be saying about pastors, since they're described in the New Testament to be, people who should be honorable. And it's been my experience that we have huge reports of corruption. And I know this will sound harsh, but I think a lot of them are totally incompetent, and they couldn't find, if they were competent and capable, they wouldn't be pastors. They kind of coalesced into a job that really didn't require levels of critical thinking, thought, and real scholarship. There's some out there that are very qualified, but there's, at least as far as my personal experience, many of them are just, their sermons are totally forgettable. Notable exceptions would be someone like Lon Solomon, who happened to be a chemist. And he found God by studying enzymes. So he's my kind of guy. So guys, God bless you. And let me just say that in the comment section. God bless you all. And let me sign off with some beautiful music here. Well, actually, combat. The Apostle Paul said, I have fought the good fight. He often refers to his Christian walk as being a soldier. And so let us fight the good fight. And thank you for joining me. And so with that, I'm going to close this show with combat.